what they're talking about. I did some additional research, and I believe I've found out how to use this tool properly. But one of the things you're going to need to start with is the specification for how much deflection you should have. That information often found in the service manual. Here I have a Honda service manual for my Odyssey, even though we'll be working on my Vigor. But just to show you that they do have belt tension specs. In addition, they also sometimes come with special instructions. If you install a new belt, run the engine for a little bit, and then readjust it. That's kind of common because a belt will stretch into place. And they also give you specs for both a new and a used belt. So those things obviously have different measurements. Usually in the deflection in millimeters or inches is what we're talking about. And they want you to apply a certain force of 22 pound-feet. So they want you to apply a specific force and look for a specific deflection. That's the long and the short of using a belt tension gauge. This won't be that difficult to get out. Voila, unboxing was so difficult. Okay, you got two O-rings. You got one O-ring up here, and this indicates the amount of force. And according to the packaging, what this does is it applies a 10-pound spec. Now, if you look at our spec here, they're looking for 22 pound-feet. So it's already confusing as far as how much to apply. I'm just going to go with the 10-pound spec. And I'm going to use a general rule. And the general rule is you measure the belt between 2 points where it lands. So in this case, you would measure from the middle of this pulley to the middle of this pulley. On here, it shows about 1.5 inches. Now, for every inch, the general rule is to have a 64th of an inch of deflection. So for every inch of the span that you have here, a 64th of an inch is normally accepted. Now, once again, the service manual is going to have the actual information, and even according to this service manual, since I can really only apply 10 pounds of force to this, I'm already at a loss for this 22 foot-pounds. And like I said, there are more expensive tools that get into this and are a bit more accurate, but this is what we have, and this will work. So let's go over to my Vigor, and we will try this out. Right, so in addition to our belt tension gauge, there are a few other tools that we'll need to make this tool effective. A calculator, I'm using this as a straight edge, some form of straight edge, and also a tape measure. Because one of the first things we're going to need to do is measure the length of the belt from pulley to pulley. It almost looks to me like that's about 9 inches. Because you can see from the middle of the crank pulley to the middle of the AC pulley, it looks like about 9 inches. Now, let's go over to the bench, talk about a little math, see if we can figure out what kind of deflection we should be seeing here. Here's the tricky part. What is a 64th of an inch in decimals? It's 1 divided by 64, and that equals 0.015 whatever. Now, we're just going to take that and multiply it by 9 because we want one of these for every inch. We have 9 inches that we're dealing with. So we multiply this by 9, and that equals 0.140625. But all we're really going to be concerned about is the 0.14. Now, we need to convert that back to a fraction. And the way we do that, we got 0.14. The way we would do this is, depending upon how many moves you have in the decimal, you add a 0 for, well, let's just do it like this. 100 over 0.14. If this was 0.140, we'd turn this down here into 1,000. But we're just going to leave it, we don't really need this extra 0, so we'll just go 14 over 100. Also represents this 0.14 here. So we can write this as 0.14, or we can write it as 14 over 100. They're both the same number. Now we need to reduce this down, and 7 can go, or yeah, 2 times 7 equals 14, and 2 times 50 equals 100, and that leaves us with 77 fiftieths, which is a confusing number because that doesn't exist on our measurements here. Anything like that, as you can see, it's much larger. These are in 1/8 of an inch increments on the tool, so this gets confusing. If you break this down, this is really close to 1/8 of an inch is what this is close to. So it's not exactly 7/50ths, but it's close to 1/8 of an inch. So therefore, we're just going to call this round numbers 1/8 of an inch. And we're going to use that as our deflection on here. Now, when we go over to the vehicle, what we're going to do, and this will be hard to show you when this is down inside the vehicle there, is we're going to set this large O-ring. Well, we're first going to find a reference point on the side of the engine, and we're going to put that here like this. So I'm just going to have it so I can reference it. Then I'm going to push down on the gauge until that O-ring makes contact. And when it does, the whole tool is going to move to a different location. I'm then going to move the O-ring up to wherever it was it moved, and that space in between those two areas is the belt deflection at 10 pounds worth of force. It's wicked confusing, but it gives you some general idea of if you've tensioned a belt properly. So let's go over to back to the vigor, and we'll see what kind of measurement we get using this tool. You want to hit the center of the belt, which is what I'm trying to do here. So I'm hitting the center of the belt, and I'm going to take my gauge, my straight edge, and just sort of place it here somewhere. So I've got some sort of point of reference. All right, so I'm going to keep my point of reference there. And looking at the tool, looks like I'm just under that one mark there. According to this gauge, I'm right here at this line. So now I will put it back in a position where it was. There it is there. I'm going to push this down. I'm going to let the O-ring come up with it. All right, there's my 10 pounds. And that moved it up to the second mark. So it was down here on this mark, and now it's up on this mark. Now each one of these is, I believe, 1/8 of an inch, yeah. So each one of these is 1/8 of an inch. So two of these would be 1/4 of an inch. So I have twice the deflection that I should have here. I actually should reduce this by half. So I should tighten this belt up and get this down to where it just moves to one mark, and the deflection will be correct. But that is a very convoluted way of checking belt tension with this affordable gauge from OTC. It's a little more complicated than just the gauge, I realize. In addition to the tool itself, you're going to need probably some form of straight edge, calculator, tape measure, paper, pen, that type of thing to try to figure everything out. Now, there are other tools that are more expensive out there.
Quý khách mua hàng vui lòng liên hệ số điện thoại 0909797251 hoặc Zalo app, website dụng cụ sửa chữa ô tô.vn.